Welcome back, everybody. This is Kyle from Discussing Comics, and as always, I'm joined here with
Clarence.
And before we get started, part of doing this particular segment that we're doing, Clarence knows absolutely nothing about what we're about to talk about, right?
Slightly terrified, yeah.
Yeah, but don't be terrified. Of course, unless, you're doing bad in Gotham City at night, you might be terrified of Batman, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
All right, so along those lines, I was watching something out of the blue on Hulu this morning that in one sitting, watched the entire thing without getting on my iPad, without getting on my computer, that had me mesmerized for an hour and a half.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
So I have a question for you.
Sure, what you got?
Who created Batman? Do you know who created Batman?
Oh, man, I don't know that.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the name Bob Kane?
Nope.
All right. So good, because that is part of the whole story of Batman and me, or Batman and Bill.
Okay.
And it was about a gentleman by the name of Bill Finger.
Okay. Weird name.
Weird name, interesting name. So it was the story behind the person who co-created Batman, who never got billing while he was alive.
Okay.
And as you read the story or you watched this thing progress, Bob Kane, who has been known from the beginning as the sole creator of Batman, was really a bad SOB.
Oh, man.
As you start to watch this documentary, and without going into the entire thing of what this was about, over the hour and a half that you watch, you follow this one gentleman by the name of Mark Tyler Nobleman, who was a writer that was basically investigating and following these leads of finding out who Bill Finger was. And it goes all the way to attempting to find an heir to the family to ultimately get Bill Finger's name as co-creator of Batman in the comics.
Now, is it one of these cases where you have this guy that's upper management or whatever, and this little peon down here creates this character, and it's like, I'm gonna just take his credit and run, or was it like a friendship where one of them just...
Okay, what do you think?
I want to say probably position of power guy.
And it was actually the opposite.
Really?
So it goes back, and the story is told like key moments, of course, that happened in the 30s and the 40s, even into the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They would show them drawn in comic book form, like old school comic book form, which was kind of cool. But basically, as the story went, Superman had been created, and DC went to Bob Kane, who was an artist, and said, create us another character. Well, as the story went, Bob Kane created this guy that had like these, the original Batman was blonde with like a Robin mask with red tights, and had this black like thing he flew with that was like bat wings.
Okay, but what was he called? Batman at that point?
It was called Batman.
So, but this is before the Finger guy came in.
Right.
Okay.
And before it had been taken to national publications, which became DC Comics.
So it's pretty much just storyboarding or conceptual.
He's drawing the storyboard, his initial concept. And like I said, this is back in 38.
Okay.
And so he calls up a friend that he knew, Bill Finger, that said, come over and look at this with me. And so Bill Finger goes over and he says, okay, well, tell me what your character's about. Well, he's a vigilante at night. Well, he doesn't look, bright red costume doesn't look very menacing.
Doesn't quite work. Yeah.
Right. So he said, you need to change the coloring. Okay, these glider things that you have on him, replace that with a cape. You can still have the things on the cape, but replace that. The mask, he said, that doesn't look menacing. If you're calling him Batman, make it look like a bat.
And at this point, he's got no credit.
At this point, he has no credit. And you see in the story, what happens is Bob Kane says, well, DC National is talking to me, and since you've helped me out, whatever they give me, I'll give you a portion of it.
Oh man, shiesty.
Okay, so that's basically what happens. So oddly enough, the contract that he forms with DC, or like I said, National, says that he will be forevermore listed as the sole creator of Batman.
Oh.
So it goes on, and it goes on from the 40s into the 50s, the 60s, where Bob Kane is making money, like bunches of money, and then in 89 gets basically filthy rich once Batman becomes Batman the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. I would think that happens a lot, maybe less so in comics, but I'm thinking of stuff like movies and music. You know, think of like how all these music executives were taking credit for a lot of things the artists were doing. Maybe not so much credit, but taking the money from what.
All right. Why do you think Image Comics was formed? Do you know?
I really have no idea.
All right, good. Right along this line, Image Comics came about in the early 90s for that very reason you just said. They create characters for Marvel Comics or DC Comics, new original characters that are owned by Marvel Comics, DC Comics.
Gotcha.
So that was why they went and made Image, was because we want to have our own creations but own them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if we leave Image, then that character leaves with us.
Do you think it happens today where a person can create a character and kind of be left in the dust, like in this situation?
I think in today's legality, probably not as much. But think about it. These are people back in the 30s who were about to go to war. You know, it's 38, 39.
Yeah.
You know, the World War II is right around the corner. And on top of that, who would have thought a character created in the Bronx on a storyboard in 1939 or 38 would still be relevant, if not relevant, immensely popular in a movie we just talked about on a previous episode.
All these years
later.
So as this guy was kind of tracing the steps of how this finger guy was involved, you know, I imagine there's not a lot to go on to go back and trace this down. So how do you even know this?
That was what was so mesmerizing about this was, you know, you find out, okay, Bill Finger had a son.
Okay,
so it's like, okay, well, he'll have heirs. Then it was like, well, Bill Finger's son is gay, or was gay, who died in the early 80s. And then, so that's like ending that. And then there's other relatives that he finds out about over the years and as he's doing his research. And, you know, it all reaches I would say a boiling point where they find an audio recording of Bob Kane basically admitting all this stuff.
Wow.
And then in a Comic-Con, I think in 2014, there was a random DC executive that was, and I won't give it entirely away, but there was a random DC executive that was asked a question at a Comic-Con that said something about, why is Bill Finger not given, you know, and he says, well, DC and the Finger family are at an understanding. And that, and somebody that's in there hears about that, and then you'll see, if you have Hulu, go watch it. I'm telling you, if you like comics and you want to know the story of Bill Finger and Batman and Bob Kane, it was like totally mesmerizing to watch.
Cool. Have to check that out.
Yeah,
man.
Check it out. And speaking of checking out, check out our subscribe button. If you're watching, we would love for you to subscribe so that you can see all of our videos. And also, if you are on Patreon or familiar with Patreon, go to patreon.com/discussingwho. And, you know, that's another way you can support us. But also another way to support us is how, Clarence?
Subscribing. Yeah, that's the single best way you can help the show. Just subscribe.
Just subscribe.
Yeah.
And also check out our podcast, which is the Discussing Who podcast. So check it out, and we'll be back next time.